Hello, welcome to my Pecha Kucha on the National Park System. The topic that I want to talk about today is the National Park System and also the National Park Service. The issue specifically that I'm going to address is that there is a limited minority presence in our National Park System. This affects African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, and Native Americans. In a 2003 survey, it was revealed that 36% of non-Hispanic whites visited a park within the last 2 years. Great. But unfortunately, compared to Native Americans, Asian Americans, and Hispanics, those numbers were significantly lower, but still within the high 30s and 20s, respectively. That number for African Americans who visited a park within the last 2 years was 13%. I believe that a lack of time spent in nature limits and threatens a person's livelihood. And because of technology, we have forgotten how important the natural world is to our survival. A huge issue of that is transportation. This right here is Hetch Hetchy Valley before and after. On the left, you can see this beautiful valley in its original state. On the right is after Congress built a dam within the Hetch Hetchy Valley. Muir, one of the fathers of the National Park System, was extremely devastated at the result of this. Here's Muir and Theodore Roosevelt, two champions of the National Park System. As a social worker, I believe we can follow in Theodore Roosevelt and John Muir's footsteps. I think that we can increase access to minorities. We can do this with incentives for urban youth who spend retreats in their national park systems. And also, we as a profession can acknowledge climate change and figure out how it impacts our natural park system and employ better services to address climate change. This right here is a beautiful tree in the Sequoia National Park. And as you can see, a gigantic hole was carved into it so that people could travel through. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe that the automobile was an extremely important invention in our history. Here is somebody driving through the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And I think this is just incredible. When I was a kid, I visited a national park in California, and because of my privilege, I was able to drive there, but this is not a luxury for everybody. Not everybody can just drive up to the beauty and wonder and experience Zion National Park or any of our national parks, for example. So, the scope of this issue has a historical aspect to it. And so, not only is transportation a barrier, but long ago, Buffalo soldiers who served in the 9th Cavalry and protected General Grant National Park Forest are a prime example of how there are north and south global power differentials, even within the national park system. So to highlight this issue and develop it a little bit further, it's important to acknowledge that the National Park System adopted historical battlefields and monuments, which is pretty fascinating. It expanded our national park system. Here you can see the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. But I kept asking myself as I pulled up our memorials and our monuments that are now a part of the National Park System, does this actually welcome minorities? Are we creating a system that is accessible to all? Do immigrants feel welcomed and capable to visit our national parks and our monuments? That question plagues me. And the possible cause is because we have driven Native Americans out of their own land. And the national park system, in a way, created by, for the most part, privileged white men, has caused an elitist sense of belonging within the park system. Here you can see the Buffalo soldiers I was referring to earlier. So they deal with a lot of systematic pressure and trouble during their time protecting the National Park Service. It's because of the buffalo soldiers that our ecosystems that are alive and thriving in the parks today are still actually there. Buffaloes were an extremely threatened species in the national park system. So what does this mean for practice? We can adopt policies like the Green New Deal and leave no trace, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But we also can become members of the Sierra Club. We could become a part of the National Park Conservancy Association and protect our natural land. The implications for practice go even deeper. I truly, truly believe that we can offer more rides on a daily to parks, creating incentives for urban minority youth and their families to go visit the national parks. For example, if women who are receiving WIC services visit a park within the last 30 days, maybe there could be more incentives through their WIC or food stamp reimbursement process. One of the most amazing things that Muir championed was this idea of not beholding nature from afar. And unfortunately, I think a lot of our policymakers look at nature from afar and they don't immerse themselves in it. In one of the studies, it was revealed that students who were taking an American ecosystem class who spent a lot of time in nature felt awe and wonder and were depriving Americans of this privilege, especially our minorities. I think furthermore, we can implement the leave no trace principles into our daily nature activities. Here they are today. One of the most important things on here is that we leave what we find and we respect wildlife. Between every 2 pine trees, there is a door leading to a new way of life. John Muir. I believe that the door leading to a new way of life starts with making our national parks accessible to everyone and everybody, no matter what walk of life they're experiencing. Nature can have a profound impact on who we are as people. Please support the national parks.